What are the world's deadliest minerals? In this video, I'm going to teach you about these minerals that you want to use a lot more caution with if you're handling them or if you collect them. Some of these crystals I have seen popping up in the crystal market. Some of them are just collected by niche collectors, and some of them really aren't collector specimens, but I want to talk about them so that you have the information and you can make an informed decision for you. Now, at Bella Luna here, I have followers that own crystal shops, and I have followers that are crystal practitioners and also crystal collectors. So depending on the dosage and the amount of exposure you have to these crystals, they could be more or less dangerous. So I am always going to err on the side of caution, and I'm going to share the information with you so that you know which minerals you should use with caution. Let's get into the video. This first mineral I have seen a lot of people selling in crystal shops, the crystal form without any type of warning. So I want to talk a little bit about it, when you should be cautious and when it's not as much of a risk. I also want to mention that I get a lot of my information about toxic minerals from the International Gem Society, which has a really nice toxic tables list. And I'll put a link to it below so you can read. And then they have their different recommended procedures for handling based on the toxin of the mineral. All right, first step, and I pulled this from MindDat. MindDat is another great mineral resource. Cinnabar. Cinnabar is beautiful, gorgeous crystal red. I mean, it's stunning. And it just saddens me that this baby is a no touchy. You want to use caution when handling rough. So I'm going to specifically say rough. There are specimens that have Cinnabar included in it, and then it is polished over. Those are okay to handle. I had some dolomite with Cinnabar included in them a couple weeks ago in my shop, and those were completely polished. That is safe. But when we see it in this crystal form, these are usually niche collectors that are going to utilize these minerals, place them on a shelf in a crystal stand, low risk. But as a crystal practitioner, you wouldn't want to be handling these and holding these and putting them on your skin frequently. As a crystal seller, you want to make sure you mention that these have mercury in it, okay? So if you're a crystal seller, this is something you want to handle with care. Wash your hands after. I probably would not bare hand Cinnabar just out of personal caution. I might use some gloves or put them in little boxes. They're absolutely lovely collector specimens, but in their raw form, I would not recommend them for skin to skin, a lot of holding it with meditation, and absolutely don't let your kids handle it. Next up is Galena. This one is always debated. Whenever I post the Galena is toxic, people want to debate it. So we'll talk about both sides of it. I'm not the crystal police. I'm not going to come for you. You can do whatever you want. Here at Bella Luna, again, I always err on the safe side. So Galena is a lead-based specimen. Now, primarily the danger comes in handling the dust that comes off of the Galena. So if you had multiple specimens together in a box, multiple kilos, like a crystal shop owner might, being exposed to that dust could potentially expose you to lead, which we do know can be absorbed through the skin. Lead poisoning is something that builds over time. So a lot of contact with this or other elements of lead paint in your house, those kinds of things could be toxic for you. Definitely wouldn't let children use this. So if you're a crystal practitioner, would not put this on children. And for me, just to be a little extra safe, I would probably put a small cloth between a customer or client if I wanted to use Galena on their actual skin, just as extra precaution. I probably wouldn't meditate with Galena. And again, if you're a crystal shop owner, you've got a lot of specimens that you are exposed to the dust. You want to be very careful with that. It's in your home. Don't let your kiddos near it. Galena sitting on a shelf, totally fine. Sitting there, nobody's touching it. Collector status, minimal, limited risk. But this is mainly for the dust and the handling of holding of it. You want to be a little cautious with Galena. Malachite. Now, I love malachite. It's one of my favorite crystals. It's simply lovely, and it has this beautiful velvety look when it's in a high-grade, unpolished specimen. Malachite, another one similar to Galena, it's the dust. So again, this is really the big risk. Crystal shop owner, you've got several kilos of rough malachite in your shop. You're handling it a lot. It does have copper in it, so you do want to be a little more cautious with this one. I would recommend washing your hands after, and the International Gem Society does recommend that you wear respirator, keep it wet if you are cutting it or you're polishing it to kind of keep and minimize the dust down. If this specimen is polished, you are fine. If you're not cutting it, you're not carving it, you're not a crystal shop owner, you've got some polished malachite in your house, you like the tumbles, fine, you're totally fine. The main risk is really crystal shop owners exposed to all of that dust from having several kilos perhaps of it, having it on their live table, and people who are cutting and carving malachite. But you as a collector at home too, if you have a rough specimen, this is not a specimen you want your kids handling. And I would recommend, out of precaution, washing your hands after handling a rough malachite specimen. Next up, asbestos. We all know about asbestos. Asbestos is really common in serpentine. I love serpentine. It's beautiful. I have these gorgeous green serpentines in my shop right now. But I do have 4 specimens that just the front is polished. It was a unique find. I was super stoked about it. But yes, the back does have asbestos on there. So these are minerals that you really don't want to handle a lot. I purchased some to sell them as collector's pieces. Serpentine is one of the things that I've had other crystal shops tell me Etsy has canceled their listing if they've tried to sell serpentine on Etsy. So just keep that in mind. Etsy might cancel your listing if you sell serpentine, but it can have asbestos. Asbestos, again, you want to make sure not handling a lot. If you've got a bunch of rough specimens, you're exposed to the dust, that is the risk. Some of my collectors that shop with me just feel uncomfortable having anything with asbestos in general. I also have tumbled, polished serpentine, fine. You're totally fine as long as you don't cut it open. It's mainly the rough pieces that I have that I want to let my customers know, hey, these rough pieces have asbestos. Be careful handling and holding them. And you can usually see it if it is visible in the inclusion, how you'll see kind of like this little fibrous. So like in mine, you can kind of see it on the back. So I know it's in there. And you just got to be mindful of that's, not around kids. Those are collectors' specimens that are sitting up on a shelf. Totally fine in that scenario, but these are not minerals that you as a novice would want to carve without any type of protection because of the potential exposure to asbestos. If you're not familiar with asbestos, it used to be used actually in popcorn ceiling. If you live in a newer home, you probably haven't seen that, but if you've bought an older home, you have seen that lovely popcorn ceiling. It may or may not, depending on the year it was installed, contain asbestos. And that's why sometimes you got to pay a lot of money to get it removed if it does, because asbestos is it's dangerous stuff, friends. Not fun stuff. Which brings us to our next mineral, serpentine. Serpentine has asbestos in it. So again, this is a mineral we're going to use caution with carving it. We want to make sure that we're handling it carefully. We're not letting our children play with it just out of an abundance of caution. If you have a bunch in your shop and it's rough, you want to be careful with that. Again, fully polished. We're not in as big of a concern, but it's lovely. The green ones I have in my shop right now are stunning. But yeah, those are more collector specimens. They're not necessarily things I would use as a crystal practitioner unless it was fully polished all the way around, and definitely not a specimen I would let my kids handle. Tiger's eye always gets people. People don't realize this, but tiger's eye also contains asbestos, since we're on a little asbestos kick here. And it's mainly the risk if you're cutting or carving it, or if you're a crystal shop owner and you have a bunch of rough tiger's eye in your shop and you're exposed to the dust. If your tiger's eye is polished in a nice little tower or a tiger's eye bracelet, you're fine. If that bad boy cracks open or you decide you want to cut and carve it, make sure you're following safety precautions, respirator, keeping it wet, those kinds of things. But tiger's eye, yes, does contain asbestos. So again, just use with caution if it is rough. Polished, we're okay. Orbornite. This mineral is composed of copper, phosphate, and uranyl, and it's often found near granite that contains uranium. So it can be highly radioactive and it can release radon. Radon is an invisible gas that is linked to cancer. So this is something that, unless you're an advanced collector, you know exactly how to store this. I wouldn't be buying this from anyone. This is just definitely not something I would want in my house. It's definitely not something I'd carry in my crystal shop. And these kinds of specimens are a little bit more niche collectors. Anywho, you typically won't see this in a crystal live sale. Hopefully you will not. But if you do, I wouldn't buy it. This is not a good one to play around with. Hutchinsonite. This one is really pretty. It has these beautiful crystals, and it's such a shame that it's also arsenic. So this is a no touchy. This is probably something as a collector, if I handled it, I would only handle it with gloves. But as someone who has children, I wouldn't even have this mineral in my house because it can be really deadly if ingested. It also can contain lead. It can contain thallium, which is used in rat poison. So this one's not a good one. This is a no touchy. I just wouldn't even collect this mineral if you see it out and about wherever you are. Not a recommended one. Alkentite. This one always gets me because I'm just like, if not friend, why friend shaped? Look how stunning this blue color is. I love it. They're so beautiful. These specimens are from France, Greece, and the first one is from Arizona. I love them, but they are not good for you, friends. So the main thing here is copper in these specimens. And so really these ones are more of a no touchy. Anytime we have copper-based specimens, the main concern is being exposed to the copper, which could lead to copper poisoning in higher quantities and dosages. I just thought we'd mention this one, though, because it's so pretty. But yeah, this is probably one you want to collect with caution. There's no risk of it having any type of exposure to like radon, like the torbernite, but it's still one you want to collect and have in your shop with caution because of the copper content, similar to like your malachite. But how stunning. Next one is stibnite, and this one is really beautiful as well too. And this one has a funny story. So back in the day, like a long time ago, they used to make utensils out of this, and people were dying. They also used it in makeup for women too, because it had this nice dark color. Don't do that. That's not good because this has antimony in it, and it can give you poisoning similar to that of arsenic. So this is definitely, I wouldn't collect this one. I wouldn't play around with this one. This is not usually a specimen unless, again, there are niche collectors that do collect toxic specimens. But for most of us, let's not play around with this one. No. Arsenopyrite. Now, this one you're probably not going to come into contact with. Pretty unlikely. But this one, the dust is deadly if inhaled, so we don't want none of that. The fibers have been linked to cancer, the dust from it. So this is just not one you really want to collect. It's an iron arsenic sulfide, and it's really pretty. It has this metallic color look, but definitely not something we want to collect. Don't have this around your kids. Don't let them touch it. It can make you very sick if it's ingested in the dust. So this is definitely like a no touchy, no licky crystal. I know that video is going to help you be safe when handling your minerals, so I hope you'll follow my tips to have that safe mineral handling process if you encounter these minerals on the crystal market. Now, several of these are not in the common crystal market, but you might find them in some more niche places, and you definitely want to use caution when handling them. Be safe. Don't let your kids around these minerals. If you want to learn more about crystals, make sure you're following me not only here on YouTube, but also on Instagram and TikTok. Make sure you hit that like button. Comment below if you have questions. Share this video with your crystal friends, and have a beautiful day.